death toll continues to mount in Gaza, where two major hospitals, the Al-Shifa and Al-Quds, have stopped admitting new patients due to shortage of medicine and fuel. Doctors are using flashlights to treat patients. Amid power outages, hospitals in northern Gaza are currently non-operational. Now, UN agencies have expressed dismay over the ongoing situation and revealed that in 36 days, a minimum of 137 attacks on healthcare facilities have been documented. Israel claims now Shifa Hospital is the Hamas's main command post and has surrounded it from all sides. Israeli forces say that Hamas is using civilians as human shields and has set up elaborate bunkers underneath the hospital. The IDF has said Israel is ready to evacuate all the babies from Al-Shifa, adding that there is no siege on the medical facility. But on the other hand, Israel will not rest until it wipes out Hamas.
Hospital under fires. The last example is Shifa Hospital ICU. There is another private obstetric hospital was targeted directly today, and two of our colleagues who are specialists in obstetric and gynecology were killed tonight. There is no service for pediatric patients in the northern area. 5 kids in the pediatric ICU left alone in Rantisa Hospital, and we don't know what's going on with them. The communication were lost, so they might be dead or alive. So now in Shifa Hospital, they cannot deal with the dead bodies. There is a tenth of dead bodies back in the hospital. Stray dogs were seen attacking the dead bodies, so the dignity for dead people are lost now. Shifa Hospital and Indonesian Hospital are the only hospital can operate in the north, and people cannot reach them. So situation there is very critical and dangerous. Medical teams and patients inside Shifa Hospital sending calls for a human community, for international organization for safe evacuation.
There has been a lot of misinformation from Gaza today. So I want to clarify the facts. There is no siege, I repeat, there is no siege on the Shifa Hospital. The east side of the hospital is open on El Wade Street for the safe pass of Gazans who wish to leave the hospital. We're speaking directly and regularly with the hospital staff. We will help the babies in the pediatric department to get to a safer hospital. We will provide the assistance needed.
يعني فكرنا امان المستشفى، بالعكس طلعت ما هي امان، يعني بقت يعني لو كمان ضلتنا 5 دقائق كان احنا كنا استشهدنا. صار يخبط جزايف علينا وشردنا، طلعنا من الشفا كلها، وابني استوى في رجله ما قدرتش انا اخده معايا، ضلوا في المستشفى مرمي، ما قدرتش، تعبت خفت خلص. خلت بقيت الاولاد وطلعت قلت لابن اختي خليك عند ابني دير بالك عليه، وضلوا قاعد عنده. وطلعنا شردنا. جيت هنا على مستشفى ناصر يعني تحميني برضه، هشوف انا وين قاعده على الارض، ما فيش اشي يعني فيش ولا مكان اقعد فيه. على الارض هيني قاعد انا وصغاري. بنام في الشارع. امبارح نمت هان في الشارع. ما عرفتش وين اروح انام، قعدنا نمشي 4 ساعات. لما تكسروا رجلينا وايدينا واحنا حاملين اواعينا، حاملين اولادنا، حاملين شنطينا.
And now let's get to our guest who's joining us on the broadcast. I'm joined by Adam Scott Bellows, CEO of the Israel Innovation Fund from Tel Aviv. Thank you, Mr. Bellows, for joining us on CNN News 18. Now, I remember the scenes before the October 7 attack. There were a lot of protests against the Netanyahu government. Ever since that, Israel has come together to kind of condemn and even fight against the Hamas threat. Take us through the sentiments on the ground right now. It's been a month since what happened on October 7th.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused by your question. It's just, what are the sentiments on the ground in Israel? What do the Israeli people feel about the war today?
Absolutely, because there's also a hostage crisis at the same time.
No,
so
yes, no
just
problem.
Take us
I
through
just
that.
wanted to make sure I understood I wanted to make sure I understood the question. The Israeli people are pretty rock solid in their resolve. All of us have someone that has either been affected by the deaths on October 7th have somebody that we know and are close to that is in the reserves right now, or we have someone that has relatives that have been kidnapped. So the entire Israeli public is quite strong right now and is quite full of resolve. There are a predominant support for no ceasefire. Most Israelis do not support a ceasefire at this time unless all of our hostages are returned. And I think that's very important to understand. The Israeli people are only opposed to a ceasefire if our hostages are not returned. We also very much look at the realistic possibility and reality of the fact that this is not going to be a short-term war. This is going to be something that may very well last up until a year. Yesterday at 11 p.m. last night, the Israeli Air Force bombed strategic weapons and military headquarters of Hezbollah. We've obviously still been receiving missiles from the south, from the Houthis. There was a barrage of missiles sent from the north this morning. So I do think the Israeli people are strong. I do believe that they have a great deal of resolve. And I feel that they are also very realistic about the reality of the long-term-ness of this war.
Right. And you must have seen those visuals from across the world where there are those protests in support of the people of Palestine, accusing Israel of war crimes. Even many protesters across the world, even in the West, saying that Israel is committing genocide against the people of Gaza. How do you react to this charge that your reaction, or that Israel's reaction, the IDF's reaction in Gaza has not been, and the word that they use is proportional?
Right. So anybody that has ever used any terms of proportionality of any kind are obviously just upset that there aren't more dead Jews, because apparently if there were more dead Jews, it would make the deaths of the Palestinians, I guess, more palatable. So the rest of them, I really could care less what pro-terror supporters are saying. And I do not consider the Jewish people or the people who call themselves Jews who are in these protests, I do not consider them part of the Jewish people. They have nothing to do with 90% of the Jewish people. They are fringe, left and right, ultra-religious, ultra-secular people that are looking to speak for the Jewish people who have no grounding in our actual narrative of the last 3,500 years. And I think that's extremely important to understand. I do not care what any person in these protests are saying personally.
Right. And I don't know if you remember the movie Munich. It has a very poignant scene where there is a face-off. Yeah, there's a face-off between a Mossad agent who is posing as a German national and a Palestinian fighter. And the Palestinian fighter says that they are going to fight this war till the end of time. And the entire end game is for them to kind of inflict such a wound on Israel that the Arab world rises up against Israel. That was their aim. That's what they said in the movie. And the Mossad agent's counter was that, what do you have? You have nothing to bargain with when it comes to fighting this war. Do you think those terms of engagement have changed a bit after October 7th?
Well, I mean, you have to remember Munich was a movie that took place in the 1970s because of the aftermath of Black September and the Munich Olympic massacre, which in a way is somewhat similar to what happened on October 7th, but obviously incomparable given the amount of people that were killed, the barbarity, and the fact that so many children were harmed during this attack. I think that October 7th is a watershed moment for the Middle East, for the Arab-Israeli conflict, for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and for the reality of a viable, economically independent Palestinian state that could also be democratic. So I don't see actually what bargaining chips there are for Palestinians at this time. I actually think that this has set the two-state solution back decades, if not permanently. As we know, Netanyahu has referred to this as our second war of independence, which in my opinion is a very significant statement to make given what was being fought for during the first war of independence. I also have seen how the entire international community has chosen to forget what our children woke up to that day on October 7th. And all I hear about now are Palestinian children. And I can tell you, as somebody that has always wanted to be a father, to see children in the streets the way that they are, it's absolutely heartbreaking. But at the same time, there is a reality that we have tried to tell the world for many years about what Hamas is capable of and what Hamas is willing to do to their own people in order to push this apocalyptic goal and this eschatological way of looking at the world, with the need of eradicating Israel in order for the world to become this very perfect Islamic place. Think about the last 100 years. You know, the British Mandate was a post-colonial backwater. You know, even Ottoman Palestine at the time was not exactly a habitable place. Child infant mortality was at almost 90% until the Jewish community began to return to the land of Israel and build hospitals and de-swamp, you know, really the land that had been raped and destroyed by the Romans and every single empire that came after them. Nobody really ever correctly estimates the amount of damage that the Roman Empire did to this country and how long that lasted. So, you know, I feel very deeply for those who have lost in Gaza. At the same time, I'm more infuriated with the hypocrisy of the Arab League and the UN and the fact that they're condemning us right now, but we still have seen no condemnation for the October 7th massacre. And I think that's extremely important. There is a double standard and a double side to this. We are constantly seen as the Goliath in a David versus Goliath fight when we're actually surrounded by a sea of enemies. Mm-hmm. And I do feel that it's taken out of context. And I think that a great example today of the gentleman using an RPG outside of the Al-Quds hospital, and then Hamas rejecting the fuel that was brought to, I think it was the Al-Shifra hospital today. It's very clear that we are not fighting a war with people that respect the rules of war. We know they've committed double and triple war crimes. We know that they are shooting people as they try to leave. I mean, think about it. For weeks, the Egyptians wouldn't even open their border to let Palestinians exit. And then when people were trying to exit the Gaza Strip, Hamas was shooting them. Mm-hmm. You know, the IDF has made over 20,000 individual phone calls, dropped over 1.5 million leaflets, and has worked tirelessly. What country in the history of the world has done that? What country drops leaflets? What country calls residents saying, you have to leave, there's going to be an attack, otherwise you're going to be hurt? The only reason why these people are there is because they're being kept there, or because they're so ideologically deep in with Hamas that they want to be human shields, because they know what the rise in civilian death rate will do for their international, I guess you could say, image, given how badly it was damaged as a result of October the 7th.
Right. Right. And this point that you're bringing up about, you know, like many people are saying that it's the Palestinians who are suffering under Israeli occupation, under Israeli oppression. Clearly, you know, it's horrific to see what Hamas did on October 7th and the consequent attacks after that, because we here at India, I think there's a sentimental resonance because we ourselves are victims of terror. But when it comes to understanding,
yes, you are. Yeah.
When it comes to understanding Gaza, because Hamas has been democratically elected by the people of in the Gaza Strip, by the people over there, there is a lot of ideological resonance with the people of Palestine and the ideology of Hamas, which is to wipe out Israel. So given that, you know, when you're fighting terror and we're trying to put the case towards the world, is it a challenge to distinguish the people of Palestine and Hamas? Is drawing that line becoming more and more challenging for the people of Israel?
I don't think that when England bombed Dresden, that they were worried about differentiating Germans and Nazis. Mm-hmm. So and that's not, I'm not saying that to be callous. I say that because this is war. One side chose to penetrate another side's border and commit a crime against humanity so disgusting that it shocked and stopped the world. Plain and simple. So
Right.
let me put it this way.
Right. Go ahead.
I think that it's very clear. While the Palestinian national resistance movement has been a permanent part of the Palestinian national identity and Palestinian national movement for nearly 100 years, okay? I think it's very important to note that the IDF did not level the Gaza Strip on October the 8th, 9th, and 10th. I think it's very important to note that everybody in the world knows what kind of weapons this country has and what type of capabilities this country has. And there aren't 2 million people dead right now. Mm-hmm. So I would have to say that not only are we, whether or not you can differentiate the Palestinian people from Hamas or Hamas from the Palestinian people, given that it is and has been one of the most popular political groups for the last 36 years, and we can see that by the amount of international support that they have, okay, I think it's very clear that the IDF is doing every single thing they can to avoid civilian casualties, because if they weren't, this war would have been over October 10th.
Right. And my final question, given the opportunity that now lies before Israel, because this conflict has plagued Israel for decades now, generations have gone by and this conflict has not been resolved. Now, given the situation of what happened on October 7th, do you feel the Israeli people have an opportunity to end this conflict once and for all?
I'm not sure what you mean by end this conflict once and for all. This conflict's bedrock is the fact that the Sunni majority of what became the modern Middle East.
Okay, let me be a little more direct then.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is an opportunity to annex Gaza once and for all and ensure that Hamas has no ground to kind of launch another attack like October 7th?
I'm actually shocked to hear you ask that. I do not believe we will be annexing the Gaza Strip anytime soon, but I can guarantee we will not be giving up the security of the Gaza Strip anytime soon, the internal security. I think everybody worrying about what's going to be after this war is getting ahead of themselves, because this war is a multi-front war and only one front is being defeated right now. We're going to have to move to another two, possibly even a third, depending on how things play out. There's a very real possibility that Syria will jump into the fray, quite soon, especially based on the comments that Assad made at the Arab League a few days ago, even though Assad has killed more Arabs and Palestinians than Israel has in this entire war. So do I see a chance for peace? I think this war was started to prevent the peace with Saudi Arabia in order for Israel to be not only accepted by all of its neighbors, but to end the Arab-Israeli conflict. And the spokespeople from Hamas actually stated that if you accept Israel and you normalize with Israel and you create peace with Israel, you are admitting that all of Palestine does not belong to us. Okay, mm-hmm. And I think that's a very important thing. Listen, everybody wants to know about what happens after this war. Well, I'm not a prophet. Neither is Benjamin Netanyahu. Neither are the heads of Hamas or the heads of the Arab League or any of the people like us that are in the media and like to comment.
Right.
Nothing can come good from conjecturing, whether or not we will have peace after this. Do I think we will have peace after this? Yes. Do I think this will be the decisive war of Israel's existence? And there's a reason why Netanyahu used the language of a second war of independence? Yes, 100%. Do I believe that there will be a possibility that the two-state solution and a Palestinian state will now become impossible to achieve? Yes, but I have no idea what that looks like and what will happen, because we have no idea how this war will turn out.
Right.
It very much depends on what's going to happen with Jordan, what's going to happen with Syria, what's going to happen with Yemen, and how will Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, deal with the critical losses that they're facing right now. And I also think it's very important to note, just a couple of days ago from Hezbollah's speech, the head of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, I mean, not only did he ramble, but it was very clear that he's very rattled by the destruction that we've brought to Gaza. So, and not only that, they were hit very heavily last night. So I'd like to see how things develop before I make any conjectures of whether or not Israel will be reoccupying or annexing Gaza. There was a reason why we left. It was our attempt at peace. It was our attempt to build Palestinian statehood into a reality, whether or not we all disagreed with it or not. I mean, there are many people who disagreed with the engagement and still supported it. There were many people who supported it with angst. I want to say this, and I'll leave this as my final thought here. If Israel was becoming more right-wing before this war, imagine what Israel feels right now after seeing 40 babies beheaded, multiple women burned and raped and bound in the streets, and 1,400 people executed, and 240 hostages taken from Israel into Gaza. I believe many of them are children. I think it's almost like 40 or 50 that are children. So I do not see us reconciling with the opposite side unless they are completely and utterly defeated, given for the past 75 years, we have won military campaign after military campaign with an inability to be given the decency of having a diplomatic resolution after that campaign. Right. So, like I said before, I do think it's premature to have any type of conjecture of what will be Gaza after this war. That could be a year from now, for all we know.
Right.
This war very well could take a year, 18 months. We have no idea. But one thing is for sure, the Israeli people were becoming more right-wing because of the situation. This can't make it any easier to move to the center on the issue of peace and Palestinian statehood. And I think there are going to have to be real efforts made by the Arab world to tamper down the extremism. I think there are going to have to be real efforts made by the international community.
But Adam, I don't think that's going to happen, and I think we should leave it at that. I don't think that's going to happen, the tempering from the Arab world. And at the end of the day, as you were itself saying, if the Hamas's end goal is to wipe out Israel, is occupation, the only logical way to ensure your security. So we'll have to wait and see, as you're pointing out, that we'll have to wait and see how that plays out.